Third is a store of value. That's the one that is concerning. We hope to avoid loss by holding it. Money holds its value if it is scarce and remains scarce. Scarcity is the keystone of store of value money. So would you say the dollar is scarce or any other fiat currency now? No. Monday, April 24th, 2023, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. We're going to go over reserve currencies today. We're going to look at pound sterling, which, believe it or not, was the major reserve currency until 1954. Most people, and even I, up until recently, thought the dollar became the major reserve currency right after World War II. No, but it took 10 years for that to happen after the Bretton Woods Agreement. And there's an old quote from Ernest Hemingway. Someone asked him, "How did you go bankrupt?" His reply was, two ways, gradually, then suddenly. And I think this is happening to the US dollar. And it happened to the British pound. And of course, I'm going to tell you what that means, not just for Americans, but for us here in the UK and in the Western world, and actually throughout the world, as all currencies right now are a derivative of the dollar. We're going to go also through what John Exter says about a currency, what it needs to be, or money really, because we haven't had a monetary system since 1971. We've had a debt-based currency system. Before we go into the topic, I want to recommend a book. It's Tower of Basel by Adam Libor, The Shadowy History of the Secret Bank That Runs the World. Yes, the BIS. I've recommended this in the past, but I think it's always good to keep recommending things because we get new subscribers, new viewers, and people haven't heard about the BIS that much. And BIS stands for Bank for International Settlements. And we're going to quickly go through here chapter 1, not the whole thing, but just the beginning. And it just goes to show who was really the architect of this bank. Chapter 1 is entitled The Bankers Know Best. So I'm going to quote someone here. After I finish the quote, I'll tell you who it is. I rather hope that next summer we may be able to inaugurate a private and eclectic central banks club. Small at first, large in the future. So when you think about the Bank for International Settlements, you think it was just a bank created to facilitate the payments of Germany's and other losing powers reparations after World War I, but it looks like they had other plans. They used the crisis, of course, of World War I and the reparations and the payments to create this monstrosity that normally wouldn't have been created. So who said that? Well, it was Montague Norman, governor of the Bank of England, to Benjamin Strong, governor of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And this was in 1925. So is it any wonder that after World War II, the British, under the leadership, of course, of John Maynard Keynes, who was the representative at Bretton Woods, refused to abolish this bank, the BIS, because it was a creation of the British and the Bank of England. And why did countries like Norway wanted to abolish the BIS? Well, because the BIS during World War II did business with the Germans, with the Allies. It was the bankers benefited from the misery of World War II, and the Norwegian delegation thought, rightfully so, that it should be disbanded. But Mr. Keynes, or Lord Keynes, if you want to call him that, said no. And yes, a couple of years later, the Bank of England was supposedly nationalized in 1946. It used to be a private institution, but if you go to their website, it's not bankofengland.gov.uk, it's still bankofengland.co.uk, right? So there you go. Highly recommend this book. I've spoken about the BIS before, the fact that it was the major central banks of Europe in 1930 that funded it, created it. It wasn't the Federal Reserve, but it was banks in the US like JP Morgan, First City National Bank, or Citibank, and First City National Bank of Chicago that actually bought the shares in the bank. So it's privately owned by the same people that own the central banks. It came before the IMF and the World Bank because it was created in 1930. IMF and World Bank, they didn't create the BIS, and the BIS is the top dog. That's the bank that needs to be abolished, I would say. And it's run like a supranational institution. It was created by an international treaty in The Hague in 1930. So we need an international treaty to undo it. Really, I highly recommend the book, The Tower of Basel. Very good read. So back to the dollar and the major reserve currency. And before we go look at what really makes a good money and a good currency, I wanted to show you this tweet here that I saw this morning. This is from David Brady at Global Pro Trader. And he put this out, and I thought this was really interesting. It's like a hockey stick. Central bank gold buys, that's the blue bars, versus year-on-year change in foreign official U.S. Treasury holdings. So we've known, of course, that central bank gold, net gold buying in 2022 was a record. Yes, it's the biggest on record since records began after the Bretton Woods Agreement. So there you have it. But this chart is put together also the change in U.S. Treasury holdings by foreigners. And I think this is going to continue. So it gives you a really good indication of what's going on. And there's also another article I spoke about yesterday in my live stream, and I recommend you read it. I'm going to put it below in the description. A link to it is from Zero Hedge. And it says it's a defund the global police moment. Jan says de-dollarization is happening at a stunning pace. You know, that's the sudden pace. And who's Jan? Well, there's a guy called Stephen Jan. He used to work for Morgan Stanley. And basically he's saying that the proportion of foreign reserves in dollars in real terms has dropped below 50%. It's more like 47%. Nominal terms, it's around 58%. So I found that really interesting, especially after seeing this chart this morning as well, comparing gold buying and treasury selling. And as the FT reported yesterday, there's a survey done of major central banks, and they expect the central bank gold buying to continue in 2023. So I expect treasury selling to continue as well. The other thing that's going to be difficult for treasuries is that the Federal Reserve itself is selling its treasuries. And this is not to mention, of course, the debt ceiling problems. It looks like the credit default swap for U.S. default is gone up to multi-year highs. seeing that tax receipts haven't been that great so far. Some people think that the default could happen sometime in early June. So it's all getting very interesting. And quickly before we look at the markets, I just wanted to go through this paper here, presentation that John Exter, who was actually a central banker. He helped create the Ceylon or Sri Lanka Central Bank after World War II. He helped organize the Philippines Central Bank, and he worked for the New York Fed. So I've been looking at John Exter, studying John Exter for many years, even when he was alive. I used to read quite a bit about John Exter, not just this essay here or this presentation he did. And he was actually a friend of Paul Volcker, and Paul Volcker was he was a treasury official when they decided to close the gold window, and he asked John Exter for some advice prior to the closure of the gold window. So John Exter is a really influential banker, and he knew what he was talking about. So let's go through what he said here about what money needs to be, what a currency needs to be. And he says here, currencies today are IOU nothings. And this applies for the dollar and all of the currencies. Now that the international monetary system we have so long known has broken down, and the world is groping through monetary reform for a new one, it is time to consider some fundamentals. What is money anyway? First, it is a means of payment or medium of exchange. So the dollar is still performing that quite well, I would say. It's the major reserve currency still. There are others who fulfill this function internationally. I prefer that the first phrase, it is simpler. We all use money to pay our bills, to buy goods and services. We also accept money when we sell. Second, it is a standard of value. We quote values of goods and services in terms of it. The resulting ratios are prices. Yeah, and the dollar is still doing that. We still quote all the major commodities in dollars. But this is what I think we're seeing now that could make the demise of the dollar very sudden. And we saw the same thing happen with pound sterling, as you can see here. I'll show you this chart. It had been the major reserve currency throughout the 19th century. And if you look at it here, share percentage of world foreign exchange reserves, it was still around 80% sterling in 1948. And then suddenly it just dropped. As you can see, it took less than 10 years to go from 40% to around, from 80%, to around 30%. And it was only in 1954 that the dollar really took over, as you can see, the British pound or pound sterling as the major reserve currency. So it was all very sudden. It stayed as a major reserve currency for like 150 years, and then in less than 10 years it collapsed. That's sudden in the scheme of things, and I think the same thing's happening to the dollar. But let's continue here. The third quality of money that it needs. Third is a store of value. That's the one that is concerning. We hope to avoid loss by holding it. Money holds its value if it is scarce and remains scarce. Scarcity is the keystone of store of value money. So would you say the dollar is scarce or any other fiat currency now? No. And it's not going to get any scarcer. We're looking at massive deficit spending in the next 7 or 8 years. We're looking for the national debt to go to 50 trillion in the US, and these are estimates by the Congressional Budget Office, and they usually underestimate things. So I think that's where we are, and that's what the world is waking up to, that the dollar is not scarce anymore. And I'm going to skip to the end of this presentation. This is what he says. In days to come, international monetary reformers will have to consider whether these new kinds of money will produce a stable monetary world. In the world's marketplaces, will they hold their value against goods and services in general? More particularly, will those issued by different central banks hold their value against one another? Most particularly, will any of them hold their value against store of value money like gold? So there you go. That's why gold is so important. And I'm going to stop right here. So that's what I think is happening. And that's why I think the central banks, the non-G7 or G8 central banks, are buying a lot of gold and getting rid of treasuries, because treasuries can be created willy-nilly out of thin air, like we've been seeing since '08, and especially in 2020, when the Fed just bought trillions of the stuff. And it's not just the Fed, the Bank of Japan is doing the same, right? So that's where I see things. And what does that mean for not just Americans, but for the whole world? Well, it means their currencies are going to become worth less and less, and it's going to accelerate. I guess the analogy of the boiling pot, where the frogs, they're swimming around, it's boiling, it's a bit warm. That's what we've had in this fiat currency system, and now it's going to start boiling, and the frogs, if they don't jump out, they're going to die in there, and that's what's going to happen to your currencies, your dollars, your pounds, your euros. And that's why I think it's never too late if you can still get out of Dodge and have some real money. So with that, let's quickly look at where the markets are this morning. 8:36 a.m. London time. So we've got spot gold virtually unchanged, trading at 1982. High's been 85. The low has been 1976. Silver is down about 13 cents at 24.94. High's been 25.15. Low has been 77. The Dow futures is down 104 points. The NASDAQ 100 futures down 36. S&P is down 14 points. So stock market indices down about 1/3%. To the I owe you nothing currencies, sterling is unchanged, 124.35. The euro is at 109.80. That's unchanged as well. The only, they're all virtually unchanged, all the major currencies. Let's check the Aussie dollar. Aussie dollar is down slightly, 0.2% at 66.80. The dollar's down a little bit here, or actually unchanged versus the Canadian dollar, 135.40. And so is the Kiwi dollar, unchanged. To the general commodities, yes, we saw platinum take off last Friday when gold and silver were getting hit. And I think it's a precursor, even though I think silver broke out prior to platinum, and silver is taking a breather here right now. But this morning, we've got platinum down 2%, just above 1100. To the energy sector, we've got WTI crude down 1%, 77.01. Brent crude is down 1% at 80.60. High-grade copper trading around $4. It's up about 1/3%. To finish off, let's look at the bond markets. We've got the 2-year yield down 4 basis points at 4.15. The 10-year is down 4 as well at 3.53. The 3-month T-bill, and that's related more to the debt ceiling situation, that's at 5.23%, up 11 basis points. To the UK gilt market, We've got the 2-year yield up 3 basis points at 376. The 10-year is up 2 as well at 378. And the 30-year is up 3 at 412. I think the tendency is for bond yields to continue rising as investors keep dishoarding these reserves, not just of dollar treasuries, but also gilts, because it's all fiat currency. And then with that, they're going to start or keep adding on to their gold reserves, especially the central banks. So there you go. With that, I'm going to wish you all a very good day. Take care. Bye.